Yes, welcome back, or welcome for the very first time to the Intellectual Freedom Podcast. I'm so glad to have you here. Last week, we talked about skepticism and whether or not things even exist, or whether or not our perceptions of things are real and valid and factual. Well, this week, we're going to look at life. Yeah, life kind of in a general sense, and how to find peace and contentment in this mixed up, crazy, and often nasty world that we live. So we are staying in Greece and looking at yet another Greek philosopher. Specifically, we hope to uncover through the theories, the ideas, and the teachings of Epicurus, why the heck so many people so often in our modern culture are just downright unhappy. I know it's not breaking news to anyone, but Gallup's annual happiness meter that they've been running for decades found that anger, stress, sadness, physical pain, and worry, they've reached a new all-time high. And this isn't just in the United States of America. This is a global problem, a global pandemic, so to speak, of people just downright questioning, why the heck does anything even matter? Or does anything even really matter? People are just feeling stuck in so many ways. A couple weeks ago, we addressed happiness with Aristotle and his theories on happiness and how to achieve happiness. But today, we have a totally different perspective from our philosopher of the week, Epicurus. And he was born about 40 years after Aristotle, and Epicurus was an incredibly polarizing figure. Maybe call him the Donald Trump of Greek philosophers. You know, Epicurus, like Donald Trump, had a fervent group of disciples, of followers, that were completely loyal to him. But at the same time, he had Epicurus and Donald Trump both have as many equally energetic detractors. Even with Donald Trump, I mean, if we want to be honest, can we get an honest account of his presidency? You know, because to his supporters, he could hardly do wrong. To his detractors, everything he did all the time was terrible. An impartial, objective analysis of his 4 years in the White House is almost inevitably tinged with bias and emotion from both sides. Well, the same is true of the man Epicurus. And it's even harder with him because he lived centuries ago, and we have centuries of history to try and sift through to figure him out. But we're going to do our best. And also in this episode, I want to make sure I lay out his philosophies on a happy life, or at least a content life, that I think there's many things in here that you and I can both grab and use in our daily life. You know, the question can easily be raised, why invest so much time in theories on happiness? Well, I think for you and I mean, really, this is something we all want. I mean, really, how many people do you know that would say, nah, I'm good. I don't want to be happy. I want to slog through a miserable and meager existence and then die. Of course, nobody would ever say that. So let's have a look as best we can and piece together this amazing philosopher's concepts on happiness. You can throw it up against some of the other philosophers we talked about, and I promise you, it's not going to be a repeat of Aristotle or of Plato at all. I mean, not even a little bit here. So if you like the idea of pleasure, I think you're going to enjoy our philosopher this week, Epicurus, and some of his philosophies. But in the end, for those of you that have been listening in, literally what we're doing week by week, towering figure by towering figure, we're moving through this genre of wisdom literature. And it's a slow march. It seems like we've been in Greece forever. And if you stay with me from the beginning to the end, you're going to be educated on pretty much every single great mind in philosophy that has spoke on the topic of wisdom, ethics, critical thinking, and living your best life that you can take in this crazy, messed up world that we find ourselves. But Epicurus, let's just jump right into it. He came from pretty humble beginnings. His dad was a school teacher. not uncommon by many of our philosophers. His mom, very different story. She was a priestess, or more accurately, as best we know, a fortune teller, which, by the way, isn't all that uncommon of a profession in ancient Greece. Of course, we still have them around today, readers of tarot cards and the such, but that was the family dynamic for Epicurus growing up. One parent was an educator, another a fortune teller. This must have made for some pretty interesting family dinner conversations, I would imagine. Anyway, through his formative years, he grew up. He reached that age where he had to perform his obligatory military time as a young man. He performed his duties. No special note here whatsoever, but after he was done with it, he became a teacher. He worked far, far away from the hustle and bustle of urban Athens or any other great city-state, and instead he was out in very remote settlements. All the while he's teaching, he's studying and reading philosophy. He did this for a number of years, actually, until roughly the age of 35. All of a sudden, the records show him emerging in Athens, the center of the philosophical world. As I'm sure y'all get by now, since we've been podcasting and talking about the Greeks, and specifically Athens was the place to be for philosophers and the spread and the creation of philosophy. But one thing he did do, he did know how to move and shake in the philosophical circles, as he gets picked up rather quickly by some influential benefactors. Don't necessarily have all their names. It doesn't really matter all that much. But in the end, he started up his own school. We talked about Plato and his academy, and here's another one that cropped up. This school is often referred to as Epicurus's garden community. I mean, loosely we could call this a school, as he had many followers, but it was quite the hodgepodge gathering of people from different social classes, even women, even some slaves. Quite the mix of people. Very different than the privileged elite that usually ran in the Athenian philosophical circles. It doesn't appear, at least by the records, that Epicurus ever had a family, ever married, or ever had any children that we know of. And the bulk of his group, they all lived together in a pretty communal way of life. Unlike many in the Athens philosophical circles, they avoided politics like the plague. This is very, very different than any of the other major philosophers we've talked about, whether it be Socrates, Plato, or Aristotle, the tutor to Alexander the Great, but more as to why his group stayed away from the political elites in just a little bit. By his followers, Epicurus was referred just simply to as the wise man, and his followers were known as seekers. So not the traditional teacher-student relationship, according to legend, and it is just that. As best we can tell, there's no fact to this, but supposedly over the door to the garden entrance was an inscription, and this inscription kind of begins to introduce us to a road to happiness. And the inscription allegedly stated this, quote, "Stranger, here you will do well to tarry. Our highest good is pleasure." Now, this might be fiction, and in our modern mind, you might be thinking, dang, what type of philosophy was this guy teaching? Some sort of orgiastic brothel or all-night Greek rave scene? Well, it probably wasn't anything that extreme, but one of the key themes of our talk today will be pleasure seeking. Remember, with Plato, pleasure seeking was of the lower order of happiness. For Epicurus, he turns that upside down. It becomes the cornerstone of his philosophy on living a happy life. But this pleasure may not be what you're thinking. In general, when we look at this group, the members of the garden, as best we know, they ate pretty plain food, meager drink, and preferred the intellectual pleasures of philosophical conversation and calm friendship over hedonistic or sensual pleasures. But the critics and haters published frequently accused the Epicureans of gluttony, drunkenness, luxurious living, and yes, even orgies. In actuality, based on the philosophy or the written documents and theories of Epicurus that we will discuss in a few minutes, these accusations are probably a classical version of fake news, a sort of defamatory accusation to bring down the guy, to bring down his school that quite frankly was not liked at all by the Greek traditional society. Epicurus was persona non grata in many ways to the traditionalists in Greek society. His teaching just simply didn't fit well in with the grandiose Greek mindset of conquering heroes, democracy, great athletes, great warriors, towering architectural marvels, and the pantheon of the Greek gods. But let's not paint Epicurus as some poor victim either, that he was just sort of swept up in the machine of power and dominance of the Greek political elite trying to control and defame him. As that isn't the case either, because over his life he established many communities throughout Greece that made it to the end of the Roman Empire, a pretty impressive feat. He became so loved and so revered by his followers that as time went on, he declared himself a god. The garden had a statue of him, and there was a monthly celebration to his name even. So while Donald Trump and his arrogance really had nothing over Epicurus, I mean, let's face it, there's probably people listening that love Donald Trump, and even those that love him, they know one thing for certain. He isn't short on self-confidence. Not even a little bit. And neither was Epicurus. I mean, really, to name yourself a literal god, I mean, that takes another level of pride. But enough of the personal and the background information. He was quite the individual. He was quite the polarizing figure. And the stories conflict on who he was and what he was all about. And I'm always fascinated by those people that make it into our histories. And here we are. We still talk about them centuries and centuries after their death. As obviously he had a profound impact on society. And obviously his teachings resonated. Or you and I wouldn't be sitting here talking about him today. He wasn't just some other guy or just some common philosopher. His work still exists today. But that brings us to the main point. What were his philosophies all about? Well, there are really a few main sources that I want to point out to you and point you in the right direction if you want to look into him. And that, by the way, if you click on the show notes, go to the Intellectual Freedom Substack page, you can read online versions for free these documents. But maybe the most important work was called On the Nature of Things. It was written by a man named Diogenes, and he was a Roman poet. Now, once again, here we have a situation where the facts come slashing up against potential propaganda. But it was later stated by a Christian, the individual's name was St. Jerome, that Diogenes was driven mad by a love potion and suffered from bouts of insanity and committed suicide. But modern scholars and historians, they simply can't validate this stance. Apologize on that. You know, we see this in our modern politicians all the time. Oh, they're so quick to label the other side as crazy, senile, racist, sexist, misogynist, or any other ist that they can make stick in an attempt not to elevate themselves, but to belittle and destroy the credibility of the other side so they can win that voter with the statement of, well, at least I'm not as bad as that other guy or gal, so vote for me. It's a pathetic smear campaign, generally executed by weak minds with weak ideas. But hey, seems this tactic isn't new to our modern politics, but St. Jerome did this way back in the 4th century BC to try and discredit one of the core works we have about Epicureanism on the nature of things. Epicureanism just didn't jive any better with Christianity than it did the old Greek pantheon of gods, so an attempt was made to smear one of the key works. At least it appears that way based on the evidence we have right now. We also have two other compilations of aphorisms from Epicurus, which are nothing more than, and by the way, when I say aphorism, what am I talking about? They're nothing more than short, commonsensical statements or truisms. So a real common aphorism pretty much that we all know is, for example, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. There's an aphorism. So these other two compilations that we have and that you can have a look at in the Substack page are full of aphorisms. So these compilations, number 1, the principal doctrine, and number 2, Vatical sayings, both of which again on that Substack page. So have a look at them. In addition, there are a bunch of other scrolls, maybe around 300 in total, that contain all kinds of ideas ranging from his rather scathing critiques of competing schools, lectures to his inner circle of followers, and slogans for his students to memorize. The style is pretty much the same for all of his works, very simple and very direct. But okay, what in the world do these people believe, and what does it matter today, and how can you use Epicureanism in your life to find peace and happiness? Or maybe you'll decide to reject everything they believe, or maybe you'll find some aspects that make perfect sense and you can reject other ideas. But from this point forward, let's just talk in general about the philosophies and what it is, and then even some of the major detractors from this very provocative and very in-your-face ideas to the traditional Greek mindset. So the first core tenet to know is that the Epicureans were hedonists, which, by the way, this word derives from the Greek word that means pleasure. They were often referred to as pleasure seekers, as I've already mentioned. But it isn't what our modern mind and our modern use of the term is when we think of hedonists today. Today, we generally associate a hedonist with a sensual pleasure seeker only, almost always in the form of sexual gratification in some shape or form. In the traditional Epicurean follower, they describe the experience of pleasure negatively. Now, stay with me. Pleasure was not merely for sensual stimulation. Instead, it was a state of rest or satisfaction that arises when we get this, here it comes, the key thing, remove physical and mental distress from our life. This is what would lead to tranquility and a peaceful life. This is what true pleasure and true happiness is about. This was the goal. Remove physical and mental distress, because then you'll have tranquility, then you'll have a peaceful life, then you'll be able to expand your mind intellectually, spiritually. So here it is. In real simple terms, the main belief of Epicureanism is that pleasure is the end of life. By pleasure, he meant the lack of pain. See, really, if you think about it, dying's incredibly scary, but after you die, pain ceases completely. So an Epicurean would tell you that if you really want pleasure in this life while you're still breathing, you must free your body from as much physical pain and the soul from confusion. Surely at this point, you're probably thinking kind of like I was when I first ran and I first began studying Epicureanism. Oh yeah, sure thing. Sounds great in theory. As of course, everything sounds good in theory. I mean, boy, I'll just remove all pain from my life and everything's going to be grand, you know? One of the greatest quotes of all time was by the great philosopher and, boxer, Mike Tyson. When he was at the apex of his boxing career, I mean, just unstoppable, knocking almost all of his opponents out in the first few minutes. Just an unstoppable beast in the ring. And he said this, quote, "Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face." Well, In theory, when Epicurus says, oh, no big deal, live happy and content by not having physical pain. Oh, and by the way, don't go stressing out your mind and soul with worry about anything. I mean, I know my first thoughts on reading this are, yeah, sure, with the economy, the politics, the violence, the social media, etc., 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 it sure is easier said than done. But what Epicurus advocates for all of us is this: chill out. Don't overburden yourself with heavy responsibilities and serious involvement, whether it would be your career, stressing over politics, your social obligations, gaining material wealth. Just be content. Demonstrate self-control and independence. Here is a key, a big, big key. So hear this carefully. Seek out pleasures which endure throughout a lifetime. Let me say that again. Seek out pleasures that endure for a lifetime, not momentary pleasures. Epicurus praised a life that escaped other people's notice. Because as soon as you introduce other people judging, watching, making statements, you're now stuck in that social cultural circle. Also, how about this? Don't spend money you don't have to impress people you don't really like or even know. Don't constantly fall into drunken binges of crazy. Don't throw your entire life into working 60 hours a week all the time. The American dream or some materialistic utopia isn't real. It does not endure. So don't, for the love of God, chase after stuff, status, degrees, the perfect body, or any of those things that society labels as, oh, so very, very, very important. All those things that I must have. I must have that car. I must have that new iPhone version 1600B25. I must have that degree or vacation or whatever. If I just have this, I'm going to be happy. Epicurus says, stop. Just stop. None of that chasing, striving is worth it. It's all transitory. On your deathbed, there's one thing you won't ask for. Please bring me my bank, all the money out of my bank and put it on the bed with me. Doesn't matter. It's transitory. So the key is to seek out pleasures in life that endure throughout your lifetime and are not just transitory. So Epicurus would tell you, if he was sitting with you today, and let me put words in his mouth that maybe he wouldn't say exactly this way, but he would say that pleasure is the absence of pain, or the avoidance of pain, rather than some silly, positive, or temporary satisfaction. But more importantly, pleasure is the lack of a troubled soul. And if you can't get over the hump and release yourself from the shackles that society and even you put on yourself, with all kinds of expectations and stresses and worries about getting ahead or getting better or not being good enough in the eyes of society or yourself, well, then you're doomed to live an unfulfilled and an unhappy life. For Epicurus, the way to happiness can be found in many different ways. For example, intellectual pleasure. I hope even something so very simple as us talking on this podcast, and maybe you picking up a few new tidbits of knowledge on a wide array of thinkers brings you some sort of intellectual pleasure. Another great pleasure, reading books, or anything that pushes you to learn something, anything. Another way to find happiness would be what Epicurus refers to as serenity of the soul. Look, society, social media, the news, they put loads and loads of pressure on us to perform. I think this is a global phenomenon, and we have listeners now in 15 countries, but I know just here in the United States, the stress to perform and achieve is intense in just about everything. We have to let go of that. We need to stop worrying what anyone else thinks about our lives, our cars, our homes, our stuff, our career success. You're not a measuring stick up against anybody else. And if you keep doing that in all these different aspects of your life, you can't have a peaceful soul. And you will stress over it. So Epicurus says to find peaceful soul, you got to let that stuff go. And then finally, you need to have a healthy body. Now let's be clear here. Epicurus would cringe at the bro science, bro gym, no pain, no gain mantra. To Epicurus, a goal was a life free of physical pain. So it wasn't about pushing yourself or depriving your body of food or doing that superset at 25 at max weight. I mean, so that you feel the burn and feel the pain. No. That wasn't it. It was about a life of moderation, eating healthy things, living healthy, clean food, nice walks, active lifestyle without the killing yourself in the gym mindset or the torturing yourself on some stupid fad diet. Just eat good food. Have enjoyable physical activities in your life. That's what you needed to do. So there you go. Even though every pain is evil and pleasure good, Epicurean hedonism is meant to result in a calm and tranquil life. Not wild partying excess. Sorry to drug rave crowd or the hardcore bodybuilder or the extreme dieter. The key to avoid is to avoid pleasures which are extreme because they have painful contaminants with them. Sometimes these contaminants are other people. And other times they are things. And other times the contaminant is you. Oh boy, look in the mirror. As often, you are your number one contaminant. Just something to think about. So you should avoid pleasures which are extreme. They have painful contaminants. Look. You get the chance to get together with friends for a night out. Epicurus wouldn't hold that against you even a little bit. Enjoy some food. Enjoy some drink. But don't let that drink turn into an all-night bender where you can't even form coherent sentences by the end of the night and you end up hugging the toilet, puking your guts out. That would be extreme. That is not pleasurable. That is actually painful. But good friends, good drink, good conversation, fun, happy times together with other in social circles, yes. Getting drunker than a skunk would be a big no for Epicurus. I think you get the point. Also, lasting pleasure is not a bodily sensation to someone who would follow Epicureanism. In the end, our bodies can and do break down, and we will die. Some of us, hopefully you're one of them, live a long, happy, full life. Some of us will live short lives, but we cannot derive our deepest levels of satisfaction from anything that comes from a bodily sensation, from any drug or other stimulant, nor can working out for the perfect body, because all of it is temporary. The most profound happiness to Epicurus comes from intellectual knowledge and getting wiser, smarter, with a deeper understanding of the world around us and nurturing our soul. Find that deep peace through learning, religion, meditation, or whatever. But you can't learn to let go of culture and society and find peace in your soul. If you can't let those go, you simply cannot be happy. Epicurus in his teachings made a clear distinction between what were known as higher and lower pleasures in life. The higher pleasures came from the mind, intellectual pursuits, artistic pursuits, spiritual pursuits, to find ways to transcend the material, the political, the cultural, the societal, which could be poisonous to contentment. The lower pleasures, they came from the body, food and drink and sex. And again, these were not bad, not to be avoided, but one must be careful to control the lower pleasures, or the lower pleasures will control you. It really makes sense, right? Food. There is nothing more satisfying than sitting down with family and friends and enjoying a great meal with great conversation. But if one isn't careful, food can become a crutch. When you're feeling mad or sad or bad and you run to the refrigerator and you get out a gallon or a quart or a pint of ice cream and you just eat the whole darn thing, it can become something that will destroy your body, that can become a serious addiction, whether it be fast food, sugar, processed food, big gulps of Coke or soda. I mean, and slowly, year after year, if one is not careful, the pounds add up. And now food is no longer a pleasure. Food can cause your body to break down. Food could literally become the thing that could kill you someday. The same thing goes for drink. Like I already talked about, or even drugs. If one isn't careful, these things can come to dominate a person's life to such an extent that you're not finding pleasure in them anymore, and you're losing the ability to make sound, rational decisions, and the drink or the drug becomes deadly. It happens every single day of the year all across the globe. When we look at the just epidemic of the drugs, the antipsychotic drugs, the ADHD drugs, the antidepressant drugs, just we're prescribing them and people are popping them like popcorn over and over and over again. There's no way to find profound, true happiness when your mind is sedated, according to Epicurus. Finally, sex can be one of the greatest pleasures in life, yet if one isn't careful, this can devolve into sport, infidelity, or addiction to pornography. That can become a destroyer of happiness in your life rather than something that builds up and enhances life. See, those higher pleasures, there isn't a point for Epicurus, and if you think about it, probably anybody even outside of the philosophy of Epicureanism, there isn't a point where you learn too much or you develop your thinking abilities and tranquility of soul too much. Those once you have them, they persist forever, and they stay with you, and they enhance your life every day as long as you live. Those higher pleasures of intellectualism or tranquility of soul, they persist. Whereas food or drink and sex, sure, they're great at the moment you do them, but they don't last. And the only way to keep getting that high is to do more and more and more. And that's why the self-discipline and focus are needed with the lower pleasures so that you use them and they don't use you. But they cannot be the focus of your happiness, because if you make anything like that, whether it's food, drugs, sex, or seeking material wealth, if you let that become your focus, you're going to end up disappointed. I think of all the ideas, maybe the toughest to grasp with Epicurus is that idea of tranquility of the soul. Calming the soul is no easy task in any philosophy or religion, for that matter, or for anybody who even tries to practice mindfulness. But to Epicurus, the best way to achieve it was to focus on those higher pleasures I talked about, rather than any societal duty, like your job or buying stuff or perfecting your body. Epicurus put great stress on friendship because one's own pleasure is dependent on others also. I mean, think about it. For nearly everyone, if you had to live a life completely alone by yourself without friends, family, or other social interactions, that would be extremely painful. We know that even in babies, if they don't get any social interaction, and they could literally die from it. Almost nobody can live 100% alone without going crazy. And Epicurus recognized that. Heck, if you even think back to the years we have went through with COVID, my goodness, the impact on the kids and people not interacting socially have been profound. And I'm not sure we fully appreciate yet the impact or the consequences that this is going to have on society yet for the long term. So peace of mind and mental well-being is achieved through intellectual pursuits like philosophy and other mind-related exercises to expand your wisdom and understanding of life. if you make that your focus, you can find happiness. The other stuff are things you do and you can enjoy them, but you cannot make that your focus. As in the end, to Epicurus, death is nothing more than the limit of experience that our mind can comprehend. Since we can't understand any metaphysical realities beyond our own mind, death has nothing to do with the quality of experience we have in life. We can't stress over that. All we can do is enjoy everything that we have in front of us. Death is not to be feared to Epicurus because, well, to him it's nothingness. It's the absence of pain. At that point, you never have to experience all the horrible traumas and tribulations and tough stuff that happen in the world. But that death, it's a thing that's beyond us on this planet Earth. So just like we need to avoid pushing for that VP job by relentlessly working 60 hours a week, we should also stop stressing over death and what may or may not come afterwards as well. You and I, we're going to get there eventually. To Epicurus, he would tell you it may be nothingness, but for now, on earth, as we draw breath, let's just live our best life by avoiding physical pain, mental pain, and stressing over it. So what do you think? Was Epicurus some vagrant hedonist like his detractors believed? Or was he a godlike figure of wisdom like his followers believed? I leave that for you to decide on your own. However, I think you can probably lay out a couple of things that you could say are arguments against Epicureanism. Since we've laid out his arguments for his philosophy, many would argue that what many people feel are the most significant pleasures in life, such as achieving a difficult task or a goal, it requires some level of pain. Heck, there are very few people that would say, wow, the greatest moment in my life came easy. In a moment of just simple basic pleasure, and voila, I got something and it was great and I never even had to try to get it. Most people would not say that. Hardly anybody would ever say that if they're going to be honest. Most of us would say that those times where something was really hard, challenging, it stretched us, it pushed us to the extreme, maybe even to a limit that we didn't even think we could get to, and then all of a sudden we finally overcome it, and that brought me the greatest pleasure of my life, and I'll never forget it as long as I live because I got pushed to my limits. Epicurus, on the other hand, counsels us to do the exact opposite of that. Avoid all pain. Stop seeking a meaningful existence based on all these external factors. I mean, I already talked about those. If everyone, think about it, if everyone all the time throughout human history followed the teachings of Epicurus, I doubt you and I would be having this conversation in a podcast. We might still be hunting animals on the wild tundra, because innovation, growth, progress, they don't come easy, they don't come cheap, and they don't come without pain nor sacrifice. I think maybe one of the hardest concepts to justify of Epicurus when looking at a global perspective or from the perspective of the entire human race is that avoiding all pain is what everyone should do. As I think it's been proven time and again that pain in many circumstances is the key to growth and happiness, both intellectual or physical. Also, Epicureanism is an incomplete ethics. And let me explain that to you, because it avoids politics like the plague. Now, in many ways, I totally appreciate this, as I think it's a toxic horror show in America to be consumed with every blow-by-blow silliness of the Democrats and Republicans in Congress and the White House. My goodness, how can one ever achieve peace in your soul by following the news, social media, and these clown politicians squawking nonstop? But still, in Epicureanism, the philosophy disregards all thought on community virtues such as justice, societal good, laws, ethical standards. I mean, whether we like it or not, these things matter. We all live in a city, a county, a state, a country, and well, our lives, they're intertwined in ways that we simply just can't ignore, like the Epicureans would like us to do. They offer no solution here. Somehow you and I have to find that positive balance. If I had the perfect solution, I'd be a millionaire. But somehow you and I have to figure out this balance. Personal happiness and social responsibility. Let's face it. You and I are social beings, and we are members of our city, our country, and our global community. Whether we like it or not, we're all connected. Epicurus basically is teaching us to just shrug our shoulders. Oh, well, shirk all our responsibility, not my problem. And let's face what we can all do. And we can all do this at the same time. It'd be anarchy. It'd be chaos if we all did this. In the end, a great mind, fascinating philosophy with many, I think, positive attributes that we can take and apply to life. Yet, at its extremes, probably tough to implement. But that's going to be like so much of the topics and the philosophies and individuals we study. But what I hope is that you found some things here to take that you can use. That's the key, right? In all of our wisdom literature now, take something from it, find a way to use it, and apply new knowledge to be a more informed and critical thinking human being that sees the world in a more profound way, a deeper way. Thanks again for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this journey. And again, go to the show notes, please. Click on the link to the Substack page. And if you enjoyed our study of Epicurus, you can read deeply on him from the original text with the free resources. It won't cost you anything to click on them. It won't cost you anything to subscribe. So I would love to have you subscribe to the Substack page as it's free. And I'll send you updates, information, and you can even contact me directly with any questions you may have about this episode or any episode for that matter. Hope you have a wonderful day. Until the next episode, wishing you all the very, very best.